What's up, guys? I'm super excited. Just after I pulled Aphidus, my first mythic champion, now Plarium is buffing it. It kind of made sense that they would buff him, but they are actually trying to make him relevant for PvP. That wasn't really certain because he was clearly only intended to be a champion for Hydra or PvE bosses. But now it kind of seems like he will be useful. He got the biggest buff out of the three, so I can't really complain. And he did get ignore defense that goes up to 50% conditionally, so this is super interesting. But the other two champions that got buffed, if we really go quickly through them, there's not too much here. It's Frolny and Mesomel, and we can see here the notes from Plarium, but basically Frolny got damage increase on every skill. We don't know the multipliers, we don't really know how huge deal this is. I would say that it's not earth-shattering because he might not have the biggest damage in the game, but that's not really the reason why he's not popular, unless he had like 50% ignore defense and he was dealing true damage, but he's not gonna do it afterwards, so it's not gonna change. But he doesn't have enough utility or survivability like some of the other top mythic champions like Nice, Siegfried and Lazarus. All of them have insane utility and also good damage, and all of them have better damage than Frolny, to be honest, so I guess he needs damage, but that's not really enough to make him relevant. And then the second one that we got buffed is gonna be Mesomel, the one skinwalker that I didn't pull yet. And she's actually getting a little bit more interesting buff. Basically it's the same thing. Damage increase on multiple different skills on her. I think the A1 and A2 on the first form and then 2 skills on the second form. But the big deal here is that she did get ignore defense on her A2 on the first form, and this is basically the signature skill of Mesomel. It attacks one enemy 2 times, ignores stone skin and basically every other relevant buff, and if you get a kill, it places a block revive. And being able to do that through stone skin is actually a huge deal, but now it's getting 15% ignore defense, which it didn't used to have, and some damage buff on top of that. Like, she's getting both multiplier and the ignore defense. That might actually be kind of big deal. Like, as long as she's in stone skin and she doesn't get killed through it before she gets a turn, and obviously many champions can kind of do it now with buff strips from Marius and so on, like the polymorph from Armans and multiple other things, burn teams. But if you're able to survive, then it's basically one shot and you get rid of the Nuker. And of course she's insanely good if you're using a speed team, because then you don't need to worry about that, and you don't even need to build her in stone skin, and you can still kill enemy through stone skin. So I think this might be actually kind of good and might make her a little bit more popular situationally. Like, she's one of those nukers that it's not gonna be the first champion that you pick in live arena, but you can totally pick her in many fights, and when you do pick her, often she's like a must ban for enemy, and if they don't ban her, they basically lose. Like, let's say that you go first and you ban one of their nukers, and if they don't ban your Mesomel, they lose. Like, it's unwinnable matchup. But now we get to the main deal, the one that I'm kind of excited about. It's actually kind of huge buff. Not as huge buff as Siegfried, but it's still kind of good. I wasn't expecting that they would actually try to make Aphidus good for PvP, but that's basically what they're going for. But basically he's getting big damage buffs, let's put it that way, and he's getting the 50% ignore defense, although it's conditional. But when you get that far ignore defense, you're basically in the territory that if you can use that skill and they don't have stone skin, it's usually one shot if you can deal true damage. And with 25% ignore from Savage, and masteries, you can get up to 50%. You can get up to 100% with 50% ignore, so it's a huge threshold. Anything less than 50% is way worse. Anything more than 50% is often not relevant, but 50% ignore defense is the sweet spot that you want to hit. So with the following changes, we aim to refine Aphidus' kit in both forms to better reflect his dual roles in PvE and PvP, increasing his overall impact on battlefield. Now obviously, you know, this is Plarium BS propaganda, or it's somebody writing this that doesn't play the game. But he has never had dual role. You will never see anybody use Aphidus in PvP. Maybe once in a new moon if, you know, some player pulled him as their only mythic champion and they don't have anything else. But honestly, I don't even know if I have ever seen Aphidus in live arena. I feel like I have not even faced him a single time. So he certainly didn't have dual roles, but he was actually considered very good on Hydra. The issue is that Tranda is 1000 times better than anything else, so it doesn't really matter that much for the big boy clans at least. While working on his main form, we aim to improve his role as a burner, not only as a debuff landing champion, but as a hard-hitting damage dealer too. Again, I feel like they're just saying everything. I don't think that's actually what they did. This doesn't change his role as a burner at all. This update changes his role as a nuker. He's hitting more hard, but it's not like his burns are more effective than they used to be. Hence, all of his skills in the first form received a damage boost. A2 will now ignore a percentage of the enemy's defense, depending whether or not the target is under burn, and it's 25% without it and 50% with it. And just getting some ignore defense in all situations is pretty good, so I think that will actually be kind of relevant in PvP, and you're gonna see multiple people using him in the near future. And to be clear, his first form is kind of the nuke form and the second form is utility, so the rest of the stuff doesn't really matter that much. So the rest of the things doesn't really matter that much, especially for PvP. For his alternate form, Aphidus' kit has been optimized to better serve as protector for his team, focusing on boosting allies and enhancing survivability. A1 will now place an increased attack buff on the ally with highest accuracy in the team, and also boost their turn meter by 10%. I don't think this matters in any situation. Your highest accuracy champion in the team probably doesn't need it, and he could use it himself, so that sounds irrelevant, but it doesn't really matter. His A2 will no longer require conditions to activate the continuous heal buff. Maybe good, but the thing is that I'm pretty sure the people that do use him on Hydra, I'm pretty sure that you literally disable the second form, so I don't think this heal matters at all. With A3, Aphidus will now place strengthen and increase defense buff on all allies for 2 turns. I think he used to do it, let me double check. I think he used to do the defense buff on everybody and the strengthen on himself. Yeah, exactly. Strengthen only on himself, so now everybody gets it, but again, this doesn't matter at all, it doesn't make any difference. His passive skill has been improved with an additional 5% chance to place a stun debuff on all enemies. So that's Plarium's description, but again, I would ignore the boss on the second form. It doesn't matter, you really don't want to use it. Especially, I mean, you're gonna use it sometimes if you get locked out or whatever. But the big ticket items are in the first form, and even on Hydra, the second form is like the utility form. First form has all of the damage, so you don't really want to switch out too often. And I guess he does have, you know, stun on both the passive and the A2 on the second form. So maybe in PvP, if you're using something like Marius or any buff stripper. Maybe it could be useful sometimes to stun the entire enemy team, but you're not gonna do that much damage in this form and you risk getting polymorph, so probably your first choice is always to open with the nukes on the first form. It kind of depends on the situation, that do you first want to get the burn or do you just want to open with the nuke anyway. And I think that's pretty much it. Like, they explain you the actual changes now without the flavor text, but I pretty much covered it. Now, are these buffs gonna be relevant? I don't think the buff on Frolny changes anything. I think the buff on Mesomel will actually make her use a little bit more, but I feel like already she was kind of on the level that if people use her, then it's gonna be good in that battle if they know the matchup. And outside of that, she's very rarely used. She kind of replaced the spot of Initve. And even though it's a single target, but she does do much more damage. I mean, the block revive is single target, she does have AoE too, but the block revive is much more reliable than any other block revive in the game, except maybe now with the with Nice being released. But yeah, I think she's good for that. She's good for speed teams, and that's pretty much it. I don't think either one of these two champions are something that you still really wish to get, but I think if you have a good account and you play live arena and you have plenty of gear, probably you want to gear Mesomel, and you probably were already doing that before this. And yeah, the final thing was the Aphidus. I was kind of just talking about it. I'm gonna try it, tune in next week when we get the buffs in the game. I don't think we're gonna get it on this weekend. I'm certainly gonna try him and see how to make most of him and if he's gonna be good. The issue with him and all of the other mythics that got buffed is that none of them have passive abilities that make them tanky. And basically all of the top tier mythics do, except these ones, so that's, I think, bigger reason why they are not top tier instead of the damage. But I think the top tier Nukers also do damage, more damage to be honest, so maybe they needed it. But I think there's some interesting things that maybe people are gonna try now with the 50% ignore defense. Like I said, there really isn't that many skills that do 50% ignore defense, and certainly not AoE nukes, so it's actually kind of big deal. The issue here is that you need to have burns on them and they can't have stone skin so that you can actually use this ability. And he's not tanky, so he's probably not gonna live to survive or to take a second turn unless you lock out the enemy or kill them. But I can totally see that with the multiple meta burn champions right now, maybe Gizmak or Sulfurion, you could potentially place the burns on another champion before he nukes, and or you could buff strip the enemy with something like Marius or many other alternatives. I feel like we're getting so many buff strippers lately that I'm not even gonna cover all of them, because basically every other meta champion in PvP does a buff strip, so there's many ways to do it. I think you can try to synergize with those things, and I think this skill is gonna hit hard, but we still don't know how much the multiplier is actually getting buffed, and I guess we'll find out the next week. And probably I need to gear the Sulfurion again and farm some masteries on him, because I do happen to have Sulfurion, so I could try the combination. The issue is that you need to go first so that you can place the burns without the enemy team having immunity. That's kind of hard for me to pull in practice, but I'll think about it on weekend. I'll let this marinate, I'll come up with ideas, and next week I will see what we can do when we get the buff. But yeah, that's it. I hope you guys are happy. I'm sure many people watching this video pulled one of these three champions and felt bad about it. Maybe you feel a little bit less bad about it now. And on another note, they did these buffs and they have buffed the mythic champions couple times before, so I think it's gonna be, you know, Now you can kind of reliably think that all of the other bad mythics that you might have are probably gonna get buffed. Meaning Galleos, for instance. I feel like there's no way that Galleos is not gonna get buffed if all of these other champions got as well. Maybe he gets a passive that makes him tanky. Maybe he can become the new Siegfried. I'm kind of getting a little bit more hope for the future, and maybe I can get something OP. But yeah, that's it. See ya.